Hey everybody, and welcome to the Disney Q&A. This is the series in which you guys throw all sorts of questions my way regarding Disney, the movies, the parks, the history, stuff like that, and I try to give you answers to the best of my ability. As always, we are here on MC Magic, the 1-to-1 scale recreation of Disney World in the game of Minecraft. We're going to run around a bit, explore a bit, and dive right into some really great questions. So without further ado, let's just hop in. First question is a simple one. This is a softball. Copycat705 asks, do you have a guilty pleasure ride at Walt Disney World? Thanks, and as always, have a magical week. No, not really. I mean, guilty pleasure implies that like you're somehow ashamed or you should be ashamed to enjoy it, and I don't feel that way. I think maybe like when I was a teenager that might have been the case, because you would feel like, oh, I gotta be cool, so I gotta like the Space Mountains and the roller coasters and the Rock and Roller Coaster. But I am unashamedly a fan of rides like Carousel of Progress, where it's slower and maybe not as popular, but I enjoy it for other reasons. So no guilty pleasures, not really. I guess used to have been like Delta's Dream Flight when I was a kid, because there was no reason as a kid to love that ride. But even then, I don't think I was ashamed of it. So I feel like at Disney, that's one of those places where guilty pleasures can't exist, because that involves being guilty, and I'm never guilty about anything I do at Disney. Like I eat like crazy at Disney, and I never feel bad about that, because you're at Disney and it's a vacation time. It's a time where, you know, you don't have to feel bad about that. Our next question comes from Super Star Wars Fan 67, who asks, I might be going to Disney with a group of 9 next year. Whoa. What do you think would be the cheapest way to stay for a week? Thanks, and have a magical day. So there are a couple of things you could do to cut down on costs, right? I sort of, when I plan a Disney trip, I think a couple of requirements that aren't requirements. They're certainly not necessary on a trip. And if you're the type of person who doesn't, need the sort of perks that I consider that I always put in my trips, you never have to do them. Everybody tours differently. For me, like, I love staying on property. That's like always a must for me. And I always get the park hopper option on the tickets, because for me, I've just sort of grown up where I will go to Park A in the morning and Park B in the afternoon. That, like, to not do that is crazy to me. But I also recognize that that's like my style. And so if you're with a group of 9, you want to save some money, one option is definitely to skip the park hopper. The downside is you can't jump from park to park throughout the day. You have to sort of plan, okay, what park are we going to be doing that day? But it is certainly an option, and that does cut down on the cost of tickets. On top of that, you can go during the off season. Their hotels are priced accordingly depending on the time of year that you go. So if you go, when it's not summer vacation, when it's not a major holiday, it's going to be a lot cheaper. So that's an option. And there are even rumors that they might adopt a park ticket system that's similar, where at certain times of year, the park tickets are a little bit cheaper, but who knows? There's nothing official about that yet. You can spring for cabins at the Camp Wilderness Fort and Campgrounds. I'm mixing up the name, but if you stay at the cabins, they sleep 6 people, and they're more expensive than a hotel room. But I think if you divide up the total cost per person, it ends up being cheaper. The downside there is you do have a lot less space depending on what type of group you have. For instance, I went with a group of 6, and we all stayed in a cabin, and we were 6 full-grown adults, and it felt kind of cramped, because you have 4 in one bedroom, you have 2 on the couch that like pulls out into a bed, you have 1 bathroom between the 6 of you. It'd be much different than if it's like a family of with 4 kids, where they're smaller and it's less space taken up. But that is an option, because it ended up being cheaper for us to use that instead of splitting up 2 or 3 hotel rooms. And of course, that's even if you want to stay on property. There are cheaper places to stay off property. And I think there are a lot of great perks that make staying on property like a given to me, but it's not necessarily a requirement to have a fun vacation. So, you could always look at options off property. That's also a good way to save money. It's just a matter of all those little things. No one of them is going to be a drastic difference in price, but if you combine them all, you start to see some major savings. If anybody out there has advice as to how you can also save money, then feel free to throw it out in the comments below so we can help them out. Our next question comes from Big A Films, who says, do you think maybe one day Disney will ever expand Liberty Square? By the way, my favorite hotel is the Polynesian. Nice. Do I think maybe one day? Sure. There's no reason why they couldn't. I don't think they're going to do it anytime soon or in the near future, like at all. They just expanded Fantasyland into New Fantasyland. That was a big project. They're, going to be finishing up Avatar Land. You're going to see a lot of changes to Hollywood studios. All of this costs a lot of money. So I think it'll be a long time before they circle back around and expand something in the Magic Kingdom. And even then, what are the odds that it's going to be? Liberty Square kind of low. I mean, we still don't know what Disney's future plans are for Tomorrowland as a franchise. Now that the movie's out, you can see their next big expansion beyond, Hollywood studios and Avatar Land to be maybe something based on Tomorrowland, and then Tomorrowland gets the refurb. So, I wouldn't hold my breath expecting it anytime soon, but there's no reason why they never would. I think it's just a matter of priorities and money and time. Our next question comes from, and is similar, it's actually a great tie-in question, and it's one I'm actually not going to answer here, but I'll talk about it a bit. David Hoyden says, since Disney has made a ride movies in the past, you have Haunted Mansion, Pirates of the Caribbean, now Tomorrowland, what would you think if they made a Carousel of Progress based movie? Thanks and have a magical day. Oh, okay. This is a slightly different question. So to answer that, I think that'd be cool. It depends on the story, right? Whenever it comes to a tie-in, what's important is that there's a good story there that doesn't make it feel too forced. So think about, the Tower of Terror, I thought was an interesting story. It was a made-for-TV movie. And you've got Pirates of the Caribbean, although that story is like completely unrelated to the ride itself, which is the best way to go about it. Because if they tried to say like, okay, let's take this ride and write a story about it, you're probably going to have a very forced story. It's not always going to be the type of story that will work well in film form. So as long as it's, telling the right story. Now, the reason I said I was going to talk about it and not answer is someone actually suggested this as a series idea. I have Revisiting where I go and I talk about how I'd retheme a ride. Somebody had the idea of, picking a ride every week and then talking about my idea for like a movie based on that ride. And I threw it past Christine and she thought it was a pretty cool idea too. So we might try that out soon. I think that could be a lot of fun. I think there's a lot there to work with, and who knows, maybe I'll sell the rights to some movie idea to Bob Iger and then I'll be working for Disney. That's not going to happen, by the way. Our next question comes from Bowie Badger, who says, do you listen to Disney related podcasts like Inside the Magic or something similar to that? So I do listen to one or two. I do listen to them like very on and off. And the reason I do that is because I make 3 Disney related videos a week. And so I'm doing a lot of thinking about Disney, a lot of talking about Disney, a lot of reading about Disney for research for stuff like Did You Know Disney? And so I never want to like do too much to the point where I get burned out on it. So sometimes I'll like pull back from podcasts and not listen to them as much just to sort of give me a break from Disney so I can continue to love it. But when I do listen, I listen to WDW Radio often. I think Lou's podcast was a big inspiration for my channel and wanting to sort of share my love of Disney. But I've also been listening to, and this podcast isn't like regular yet. Like they haven't been putting out episodes on a regular schedule, but they've been putting out episodes, and it's called 2 Cups of Magic. And it's this engaged, soon to be married couple who love Disney, and they talk about Disney. And so far their episodes have ranged, from talking about the parks, talking about their experience on the parks. It's sort of all over the place, which is cool because it's going to be something different each time. If you want to check it out, I think it's really great, and I think they have a great chemistry, obviously, because they're engaged, they're going to get married, and it makes for a good time. And that's sort of why I started listening to WDW Radio to begin with. There are a lot of other podcasts out there, some that are a little more, I don't want to say cynical, but more critical of Disney as a company. And those, I think, are from people who might live in the area, who go there all the time. And so it's become just part of their everyday. As somebody who lives in New York, who only gets to go every couple of years, for me, when I want to listen to a podcast or read a book or, watch something, it's about wanting to relive the fun experience of going. So I like try to skew away from like touring tips and stuff like that, or people who might be overly critical of like some change that was made to the ride, because I'll take anything Disney, so it's hard for me to relate to that. And that's why I like 2 Cups of Magic, because it's not them sort of analyzing and breaking apart Disney as a company or as the parks as entities. It's more about just like, why do they love Disney, and sharing it with people. Our next question comes from Susan Bismack, who says, do you think Disney is overloading on action movies? Now, it certainly may seem that way. We've got the Cinderella, you've got Maleficent, you've got Tomorrowland. But the answer is no, I don't think they are. And I think if you look back historically, you'd see that objectively they're not. You have to remember, first of all, Disney owns other companies. They're called subsidiaries, and Disney's got a few. Touchstone. Back in the day, they had Miramax. I don't think they have the Miramax anymore. They have these other film companies that they put out films through when they don't want it to be under the Disney brand. So if you look back at the 90s, the mid or late 90s, they were putting out a ton of action movies. You might not have thought that they were like putting out a lot because they weren't called Disney movies, but Disney, the company, was putting out a ton of action movies. And at first it did great, but then they started to put out too many that it actually started to hurt the box office because they weren't giving each project enough time. I think today you're seeing a lot more Disney branded live action movies, but overall as a company, I don't think they're putting out nearly as many live action films as they used to. And I don't think there's a problem with that. I mean, you say overloading or too much, and that implies that like it's a bad thing. And I don't think it is. I don't think Disney needs to be cornered into just being a staple animation studio. Animations take a long time to make, even if they decided not to do Tomorrowland or, Cinderella, or now they're working on, Beauty and the Beast live action. Even if they canceled all of those, it's not like you'd be seeing more animation, right? Because it still takes years and years to put those together. So this is more like filler. And now they've got Marvel and Star Wars, and it seems like a lot, and I could see why it would look that way. But I think historically, you look back, it's not actually the case at all. And they've been good movies. So I think there's no reason to think that it's too much. Our next question, I am totally unqualified to talk about. Zatstar says, what do you think of the Matterhorn's new Yeti and the removal of the Wells Expedition tribute? I love the new Yeti, but I find it odd that they removed the tribute. And don't you find it amazing that even though the new Yeti is awesome, that all Disney fans talk about is how they miss the old roar of Harold and they completely ignore the tech update? So yeah, there's a new Yeti in the Matterhorn. I can't comment on it in any way. I've never ridden the Matterhorn with the old Yeti. I haven't ridden it with the new one. I have no idea what it's like. I know there are POV ride videos out there, but I refuse to watch it because I'm going to Disney for the first time. I'm going to Disneyland this summer, and so I want to sort of experience it fresh for the first time. That said, I did read that the Wells Expedition tribute was removed. If you don't know what that is, there's in the Matterhorn, or there used to be, a crate that said Wells Expeditions, and it was a sort of tribute to Wells, who was the president, COO of Disney in the 90s, who tragically died in a helicopter accident. He was an avid mountain climber. That was Frank Wells. And so they put that nice little tribute, and it is gone. And I tried looking into it, and I couldn't find any evidence I couldn't find any news as to why they removed it. So it could have been, logistics. It could have been political within the company. Who knows? Yeah, it's sort of a bummer. I think it's good to have a tribute to him. Him and Eisner in the late 80s, early 90s played such a massive part in turning the company around that I think there should be some tribute somewhere to him. But as for the Matterhorn and the new Yeti, I mean, I can't really comment. I do think you're going to see that with anything with Disney fans. Disney fans love what they love, and people in general just don't like change. And so when things change, they're going to cling on to what they love, and they're going to try and reject the change. And I try to consider myself the complete opposite. I love, new things, and I'm always willing to change things up. But you see that happen a lot with Disney. And I think what you see happen all the time is people eventually get over it. And then, a new generation loves the new thing that everyone hated. And then, eventually that'll change, and they'll grow up and they'll hate that it's changed. The next question is a little bit, it's sort of like it's like a code. Lemurs18 says, Nintendo equals easy removal of Marvel Land at Islands of Adventure equals Super Mario Island and Marvel rides at Disney World /land. Yes and no. I think what you're trying to say is, will the deal with Universal and Nintendo, which is that they're going to be working on attractions, mean that they can replace Marvel Land with more Nintendo stuff and then free up the obligation so that Disney can do Marvel rides in Disney World? And then you ask yes or no. And my answer is actually going to be no. I don't think that's going to happen. And I don't think that would be beneficial for Universal. So I don't think they'll do it. Universal's in a really great position right now. They can continue to use Marvel for their attractions in Florida for as long as they want. There are a lot of rumors going around, oh, the contract's going to be up soon. That's not true. It says in their contract that it's in perpetuity. As long as Marvel wants to and continues to operate their, as long as Universal wants to and continues to operate their Marvel attractions in Florida, then that deal is in place and Disney can't do anything about it. The best Disney can do is offer an obscene amount of money to try and buy out that contract. And I don't think Disney's going to do it because they have so much at hand that they can work with that they don't need those Marvel attractions. And they can use Marvel attractions elsewhere. They could do it in Disneyland. They could do it in Europe, in Asia. And I think there's no reason for Universal to give that stuff up because Marvel's doing really good right now. You know, it's through association going to only help them. So it's one of those, you know, double-edged swords where, like, as long as Disney's making great Marvel movies, Universal has no incentive to drop the Marvel attractions, and then Disney has no way to make Marvel attractions in Disney World. But I don't think Disney's going to care about it financially. I don't think Universal wants it. I think it's more of outside of Florida that the Nintendo deal is going to be important, because outside of Florida, that is where Disney can start putting Marvel attractions. And so even if Universal could put a Marvel ride in, you know, I think Spain, or, well, let's talk Japan. Let's say they put it in Japan. Disney can put Marvel attractions in Tokyo Disney if they wanted. There's nothing stopping them. And then it's a direct competition between Universal and Disney with Marvel and Marvel. So now that they've got this Nintendo deal, that's going to sort of set them apart and allow them to do something different that Disney can't do. So I think in Florida, I think you're going to see Marvel for a long time, and I don't think you're going to see it in Disney for a long time. Our next question comes from the Carton, who says, have you heard about the NBA experience coming to Disney Springs in 2016? What are your thoughts on this and how Disney is able to implement this into the parks with Universal still operating the NBA City restaurant in City Walk? Will Universal have to shut down the NBA City? Thanks and have a great day. So they are opening this experience, the NBA experience in Disney Springs. It's going to have like high-tech stuff, and I sort of read up on it a little bit. I still don't have a full understanding of like what that it is, if it's like a fancy store. But they are doing that. There's a rumor that the Orlando Sentinel is reporting from like an anonymous source that the NBA restaurant in City Walk is going to shut down this year. Who knows if that's true or not? I don't know the specifics of the contractual agreements that might force them to do this. It could be a matter of them just closing down so they're not competing. It could be a matter that they have had other plans, and that's why NBA struck a deal with Disney. There's so many unknowns. As for what I think, I don't follow sports, so I don't really care either way. It could have been NBA or MLB or NFL. It would have all just gone right over my head. I don't watch any of that stuff. I think it's cool that they're going to have more sports experiences. In the 90s, they really tried to do more and more sports stuff. I mean, Disney even owned teams at that point. So it's cool that there'll be something there for sports fans. I don't think it necessarily needs to leak into the parks at all. I think what benefit of Disney World is that there's so many different things in different parts of the property that you don't need it all to cross over. So yeah, Disney Springs will have this NBA experience. That's great. If you're an NBA fan, you could go do that. There's no really need to just like squeeze it into like Hollywood Studios or something. That said, I guess if they wanted to, having this relationship with the NBA to do this could be a good gateway into organizing larger projects if they ever wanted to. And then finally this week, our question comes from Vincent, who is 11 years old and lives in California right by Disneyland. You wanted to ask, do you think a Beauty and the Beast dark ride would be a good attraction? I would love to see one in my opinion. And where would you put this ride? The Imagineers were in fact going to have a dark ride during Euro Disney's times when they made Disneyland Paris, but the idea had been scrapped. My other last question, are you excited about the new upcoming Disney film Inside Out? If so, do you think the movie is popular, might get some meet and greets with the emotions, or even a ride, which I doubt, but depends on how popular it is. So, Vincent, let's knock through these. Super excited for Inside Out. Everyone's saying like Pixar's return to form. They're like on top of their game. It's going to be great. I also think it's going to be so financially successful because you have these different attractions. You have these different emotions. I think from a like cold business perspective, that's going to be a marketing goldmine because every kid's going to have their favorite emotion. They're going to want that emotion's plushie or the t-shirt or the toy, and there's going to be all of them, or they're going to want them all. And I think this this is going to be, in my opinion, as long as the movie's as good as people are saying, I think this will be emerging of like the critical success of something like Toy Story or Finding Nemo or Up meets the financial and commercial success of something like Cars, which has a sequel because, you know, even though critically it wasn't as good as the other movies, kids loved it and the merch did really, really well. And so it was a huge moneymaker for them. And I think this is going to be a combination of that. And so I do think you might see, you know, you see the emotions in the parks maybe. As far as an attraction, I would love to see them use this as a jumping off point to completely refurbish the Wonders of Life Pavilion. I totally forgot it for a second. The Wonders of Life Pavilion in Epcot, because I think that'd just be a great fit, and there's no other use for that building besides some like seasonal stuff. So I think it'd be perfect for that. In regards to Beauty and the Beast Dark Ride, I think Imagineers can make it fantastic. I think they can make any ride fantastic. I think from a business perspective, it'd be weird if you ever see it happen, because that movie is now at this point old. You know, it's like what, 20 years old. It's either close to 20 years or it's already past the 20-year anniversary. So it's not as relevant as something that's going to be newer, especially like Star Wars, Marvel, that sort of stuff. So I don't think you'll see it happen. But yeah, I wouldn't be upset if it ended up happening, and I would love to see it in Disneyland Paris. I think that'd be a perfect place to put it, obviously, for the setting. I think with the new Fantasyland expansion, we don't need to see anything in Disney World. I think Disneyland expanding anything is tough because of the space. So I think the international parks would serve better to have those attractions. Anyway, fantastic questions this week. I want to thank everybody for their questions. If you have a question for the Q&A, you can leave it in the comments below. You can tweet me. I'm at RobPlays. You can even send it to me. I have a P.O. box, and I can never remember the address, so I have to read it out. You can send it to RobPlaysThatGame, P.O. Box 864079, Queens, New York, 11386, and I'll read it out on the air. Thanks for watching. Have a fantastic week. Whatever you're doing, make the most of it because it makes it that much better. And I hope to see you next time for the next Disney Q&A. Bye, everybody.